Money never sleeps, pal.
Hey there, this is Pete Townsend from Drouillard Ventures, and welcome to Money Never Sleeps, a podcast that looks inside the head of entrepreneurs and at the crossover of startups, enterprise, finance, technology, and life as we know it. This episode of Money Never Sleeps is kindly sponsored by Ireland's fintech and financial services recruitment specialists, Top Tier Recruitment. If you or a colleague need help attracting and retaining great talent for your fintech or financial services company, it is highly advisable that you build a relationship with the team at Top Tier Recruitment. You can find them at toptierrecruitment.com and tell them we sent you. This week, we talked to Faye, Walsh, Drouillard, a founder of WakeUp Capital, an Ireland-based early-stage impact fund. With the fintech roots of our podcast, we're opening up our own minds once again to look outside of our immediate space, which is quite relevant now that I'm mentoring the founders of two social impact startups here in Ireland. Just a heads up before we get started, though. We've been moving platforms over the past few episodes and still working out some of the kinks on the sound side. So my track is a notch below where I'd like it to be, but it was a great conversation and I know you'll like it. So here we go with Faye, Walsh, Drouillard, and this week's episode of Money Never Sleeps.
Money never sleeps, pal.
Here we go again. Welcome to Money Never Sleeps. We're recording today from the home studio, and we're on with Faye, Walsh, Drouillard, the founder of WakeUp Capital, which is an early-stage impact fund that backs European companies already shaping a better, brighter future for people and planet. Faye has a really interesting history as an angel investor, board member, and consultant, and she is originally from the United States of America, just like yours truly. Welcome to the show, Faye.
Thanks, Pete. Glad to be here.
Awesome to have you here, and shout out to Rory Guinan from Endeavour Ireland who connected us.
Great. Thanks, Rory. He's a star.
Yeah. Interesting, Faye, since you and I first spoke after the intro from Rory, I started mentoring two founders of two social impact startups here in Ireland.
Oh.
So really good kind of basis and foundation for this chat we're having today. I think it's really interesting and kind of thinking about what you're looking at in terms of the investment sectors across agri-tech, the circular economy, renewables, preventative health and wellness, fintech and edtech. So maybe to just get started, can you tell us your backstory and how you got to this point?
Absolutely. Again, just thanks for having me. It's such a pleasure, and it's always great to connect with a fellow American in Ireland.
Definitely.
So I've had a bit of I guess what we call a journey geographically, but also in the kind of work that I've done. I was born and raised in Washington, D.C., which is often kind of a scary place right now, hoping to see that improve. And I really had a wonderful upbringing, living in a city where people at that time were coming to do really good work, and of course build up our country. And I grew up around all kinds of really interesting people too, whose parents were either in government, journalists, working in not-for-profits. It was an incredible city. My parents are originally from the West Coast. They actually met at Stanford University, which is also where I was raised every summer of my life and spent a lot of time there as a grown-up. So when people ask me where I'm from, which is the lovely Irish intro question, I have to say both, because I really am a native Washingtonian, but also a Californian, and probably a Californian at heart. The West Coast feels very much home for me when I'm there because of also, I think, some of the traits that many people who are in entrepreneurship and startups and investing look for, which is this sort of open spirit, love innovation and trying something new, which is how my forebears ended up there, moving out to part of America that was, the land of opportunity. Yep. And I also like to just mention, with some of your Irish audience members that I am a quarter Irish. That's where my Walsh comes from. So I do have some people, my people from Mayo originally, but my family would have left Ireland almost 100 years ago. So while I'm, definitely American, I'm also got a bit of Irish running through me.
Mine goes back about, 170 years now, 180 years at this stage.
Wow.
But it's, I think anyone living in Ireland from the US naturally is going to have some sort of Irish heritage.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm also grateful that my cousins who are here are still living. So excuse the dog barking in the background.
That's all right. That's all right. No worries.
It's part of our time right now. So anyway, I like to mention that because I think it's really helpful to when people say you're from the States. It's nice to kind of place that. I also spent time living in Seattle, and I've lived in San Francisco and Los Angeles. So sort of up and down the West Coast. When I left the East Coast, I went to high school actually to Sidwell Friends, and I mention it because it's a school where many important sort of Americans have gone to over time, including the Obama children. And when I was there, I was actually in school with Chelsea Clinton. It's a really wonderful school that actually has formed and shaped the way that I see the world, as it's a Quaker school, and we were really taught about the importance of giving back to your community and to have some kind of a sort of purpose in whatever work that you do. And I went to college in Seattle, University of Washington, actually, where my father had attended law school. I really wanted to go back to the West Coast, where my mother had been telling me all my life I needed to end up eventually. And I wanted to work in international business. That was sort of my dream and my vision. And I studied international economy there, and I also studied French. I've always been interested in French. Funny thing, I ended up with a French last name from my French husband. And I also was interested in somehow working abroad. That was always important to me. I grew up in also an environment where people from all over the world, it wasn't just Americans, obviously in DC. So my mind, was, you should just be surrounded by people from other places. And again, I think that kind of explains why I've ended up over in Europe. I started off working actually in a fashion company where I learned a lot about trade and about what I guess we would call fast fashion now. And decided that probably wasn't a place for me, but it was really fun to learn about that world. I was working in San Francisco at the time. And this was when the first tech boom was happening. I was actually not interested in working in technology. I was really interested in finding a way out of America. So I thought working for a company like that would help. But then I got involved in a trial. I was a jury duty member. Everybody in the States, we get called up for jury duty. And I sat on a trial where I had observed, firsthand what happens to individuals who are defended by public defenders. And these were young people who got involved in some pretty unfortunate situation. And I'm mentioning this because my dad is a lawyer. And, we always think, you either want to be like your parents or maybe you try not to be like your parents. I had this hint that maybe I was going to get involved in the law because of him. But I thought, well, first I'll go to business and then maybe, if I have to, I'll think about being a lawyer. But that trial actually really opened my eyes up again to the opportunities and the of getting involved in the law, but also the challenges that our legal system has. It was a murder trial. It was very challenging, and we ended up putting away 2 young people into prison for the rest of their lives. So I thought, okay, that's it. This 1-year business experience is interesting, but I need to go and follow in my dad's footsteps. And decided I wanted to look into being a lawyer. So I ended up moving to Los Angeles and working for one of the top firms in LA to see if, that's the path for me. I became a paralegal, getting ready to take the legal exams. But I, of course, found that this law firm had an opportunity for me to move to Europe at some point. So I kept that in the back of my mind. But this is a really important piece of my journey. As I was working for this law firm, it was in corporate mergers and acquisitions. It was excellent experience. But I met an amazing woman. This was probably a turning point in my career. My aunt had been volunteering for her, and she was a teacher in Long Beach, California. And this was post Rodney King riots, which is, of course, relevant right now. And she was running this program for young people in a high school program, and they had just published this book. And my aunt was one of her volunteers and said, "Come meet this amazing woman. She's changing students' lives." And of course, I was going to be at my aunt's house anyway. So I met this woman, and it turned out she had just published this book with her students, who were some of the most underperforming students in all of Long Beach area. They were coming from all kinds of incredibly challenged backgrounds. And she had enlightened them and taught them about the power of writing and reading. And these were high school students who were reading at probably a 2nd grade level. And she introduced them to the story of Anne Frank and basically helped them learn from young people who had grown up in war environments how they could overcome some of their challenges by embracing reading and writing, and specifically the Diary of Anne Frank. These students actually ended up writing a book that became a New York Times bestseller and eventually was turned into a feature film starring Hilary Swank. I didn't know that at the time, but what I did know is that she was amazing, and her name is Erin Gruwell, and she really, we really connected. She also happened to be running for Congress at that time. She was recruited by the Democratic Party to run for Congress. And I had done a little bit of work in politics myself, helping with another presidential campaign. And so her brother was there and said, hey, you're from DC, you know about this stuff. Would you like to come and help us run this congressional campaign? And of course, I thought that all sounded really fun. So I did that as my part-time gig on the side of working at the law firm. Got to know all these incredible students, got to know Erin. The students are called Freedom Writers, named after the Freedom Riders. Of course, wonderful John Lewis, who's just passed on, is one of their inspirations, and actually met them in DC. So this book and this story and these young people, I just got sucked into their worlds, and we ran an incredible campaign. She was the youngest woman running for Congress at that time. And it was amazing. And I thought, you know what, this is what I'm going to do. This lawyer job, or this paralegal job, is interesting. Maybe I'll become a lawyer, but I'm going to help change the world through politics. And if I can get involved in this campaign, and then we go to Washington if she gets elected, maybe that's what I'm meant to do. Well, interestingly enough, we lost our race by 1,000 absentee ballots. But it was one of the most amazing experiences I've ever had. We were running a bilingual campaign all over Long Beach. And this is a really tough time in history. This is, late 90s. And this was actually into 2000 at this point. So, we lost, and it was devastating. But at that point I had great experience. I had a great connection. But I needed to recover from that loss. And there was an opportunity, an opening in Paris, to go work for the same law firm I was working for in their research area and be a paralegal there. And so I said, all right, I'm headed over. So I went to Paris and got a great experience working in a law firm. Again, continuing to work toward being a lawyer. But over time, I think I spent about 3 years doing that. I also realized, working with all these businesses, that maybe I still want to be in business. And what if the lawyers end up working for me instead of me being one of the lawyers? Yeah. So I started studying for my MBA instead. I thought, well, when I go back to the States, why don't I go to business school instead? And that's what I really wanted to do. So I started studying, for the GMATs, which is the exam you take to go to business school. And funnily enough, I got a phone call from my friend Erin, the lovely teacher who had run that program. And she said, Faye, we just signed the rights to get a movie made about our story. Can you come back and help us get organized? Reese Witherspoon is going to play me in this movie, and I really need your help. And she had been calling me every year or so to check on when I was coming back. And I said, Erin, I'm coming back, but I really want you to know I want to go to business school. So I'll help you for 6 months, and then I'm going to go to school. And so guess what? 6.5 years later, I ended up running the Freedom Writers Foundation with her and helping to get the movie made and raising money and getting the program internationalized and promoted into a much more professional social enterprise. And it was one of again, I say the congressional run was amazing, but I'd say those 6.5 years were formative for me. We learned,
I believe it.
Yeah, we learned so much. And it's one thing to go and work with really determined entrepreneurs. It's another thing to work with young people who have overcome things such as homelessness, drug abuse, mental health issues, being brought over to America as illegal immigrants, and then to help them become part of this really was a business that has an aim to improve education outcomes for students worldwide, and raising money from all kinds of incredible people. We had deals with book publishers, with movie studios. That was a huge part of my job, was to bring in the revenue from those different organizations and companies. Also, raising just money from donors. And then we also were able to access grant capital. And then I had one very influential investor who treated us like a business. And this is where I got a flavor for how and what I think about early stage investing. He looked at us like, he said, what is your secret sauce? How are you able to reach all of these teachers and students and young people and school districts? And how can we bottle that and spread that around? And what kind of finance do you need? So I ended up having to write a business plan for the organization. I had a wonderful mentor. And this person was a billionaire now and really treated us as if, as we were a business. We were not only making a difference, but we were also generating revenues from the sale of products and services, and also public speaking and revenues. And it was phenomenal, but it was also really challenging. We were young. I mean, I held the role of, head of this company. We had a company. We also had a not-for-profit, and I was not even 30. I was 27 at the time. So I had a lot to learn, but I learned very quickly. And I learned about the importance of building relationships and helping to translate our vision into a business so that, people on the other side of the table would be willing to put money towards us, not just because we were a feel-good organization, but because we actually were making good profits and we were able to scale and move forward. So that got me sort of to through Freedom Riders, and which is the name of the organization, Freedom Riders Foundation. But the investor I spoke of also had an advisor who was a professor at UCLA Business School, and he said, "Faye, why don't you just go to business school now?" And I thought, well, okay, I guess I could do that. I've always wanted to. So I ended up going to business school while I was working full time, which is a wonderful program at UCLA, the fully employed program, and I spent 3 years doing that. So the movie was being released. I was on a 27 city movie tour, and then also finishing my MBA. So that was phenomenal. And wow. Finished that up, and then decided it was time to make a break from that world. But I also this is a really important part of sort of my investment vision, and it kind of takes me to the next phase of the work I was doing. I had learned so much so quickly and quite young. But I was also realizing that there are so many wonderful entrepreneurs out there having epiphanies and light bulbs go off and great ideas. But how could I take my information and knowledge and experience? I wanted to influence the people who had the funds. I wanted to get into their brains and really understand what was making their decision, what made them tick, and how did they come to those decisions. Partially because we worked so hard. We had a feature film, we had various books, we had incredible people connected to us. I got a phone call from Warren Buffett's daughter on a Friday afternoon. We were able to raise money from really wonderful people, but each of those relationships took a lot of nurturing, and you had to get into their strategy. So I thought, well, maybe I could have an influence on the funding side. But before I was going to do that, I thought, could I also see what it's like to sit in their shoes and stand in their shoes and make those decisions myself? I'm going to start making my own sort of, initially it was more donations, but I'm going to make my own decisions so I can not just talk the talk, but also walk the walk. And my husband and I had always been quite good about giving money away, but I wanted to also specifically support social entrepreneurs. So I started doing that by being part of a group called Social Venture Partners, where we give time, but also funds to support early stage social ventures. And it just came very naturally to me because I could speak on behalf of my experience. I understood what it was like to be on the other side. And I have found it incredibly rewarding. And I've done some form of that for the last 12 years, and have found that actually, being on the other side of the table where you have the ability to help make the decisions on where the money goes is, to me, sort of what I'm meant to be doing. I just can feel it when I'm there. Because maybe it's having had experience on both sides, but I really feel like it's something that works for me and suits me. So if I take myself forward 10 years, so you can finally get to your next question, I decided, my husband and I had an opportunity to move to Holland through his work. And so I thought, well, I've finished business school. I've had this great experience. Let's see if I can go do some more of this work, but in a different market. So we moved to Holland. I also had our first child at the time. She's now 10, and moved to the Netherlands and started doing similar work, getting involved in different organizations and continuing to consult, which suited me, having young children. I'm sure many people listening understand. Oh, yeah. Professional world is not always well set up for parents with young children, but I was able to keep up some work doing consulting for various companies still back in the States, and then also did a bit of work in Holland. And then I thought, well, what about having another group like Social Venture Partners, where we bring donors or investors together and think about how to scale really interesting social enterprises. And I just didn't find the group that I was looking for. And this was, almost 10 years ago now. So I created my own organization, which was more around getting people involved in giving away money than investing money. But it's a similar concept. We pooled funds, we heard from groups, and we then gave them money. And it's been great. We've been doing that for 6 years. That's the Giving Circle of Amsterdam. And then we ended up getting moved to Ireland. This is 6 years ago, again, for my husband's work. And I mention him because he works in a business that I think is relatively well known in Ireland. It's aircraft leasing business. So that's really why we were there. And came here and continued on doing really great work with different organizations and companies, and started another Giving Circle, and have sort of been here ever since. And I can carry on with the story, but that's a sort of my background.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Faye, I can't believe it. Like the first time that we spoke, right? I'm listening to your story and I'm like writing down these things where you and I have crossover points. I'm getting excited. I'm getting chills down my spine. Like, I've got to tell you about this. And I just had another about 10 or 15 of those. Okay.
Okay.
But I'm not going to go through them. The most interesting one, going very, very back nearly to the beginning of your story, is Sidwell Friends. I was actually outside that school at some point in 1982 or 83.
Wow.
Which is hilarious. A friend of the family lived in Bethesda, Maryland. We were there on holiday. Their kid went to Sidwell Friends. There's so many more crossover points in that.
Wow.
But when I was looking at your background, Faye, earlier today, in recalling the first chat that we had, I wrote down something completely cursory that I think you kind of just summed up there, which is a very impressive history in social impact with a foundation of management, strategy, finance, and the people side of things, right? Which is again a very cursory summation. But I think I was right with that. And then just with everything that you've done around freedom riders and working on political campaigns and going to business school and working in Paris, it's just created this incredibly enriched being of experience, right? Impressive. So with that, what I wanted to ask you about was that I noted on your LinkedIn profile, one of the first things that you say is that you are unwilling to accept the status quo. That is plain as day after the story that you just shared with all of us, Faye. What was your earliest memory of that unwillingness to accept the status quo in action?
So I think this is a story I've actually told before, but it's one that is imprinted in my memory. Growing up in Washington, D.C., which I guess, I say things differently, but when we don't have such a horrific leader in charge right now in our country, but, it's most powerful country in the world, at least for now, we'll see, and the capital of it, you would imagine everything is working there. That the actual District of Columbia is this city. It should be working. It should be highly functioning. And I'm actually born in the city itself. So I'm not talking about the regions around. I'm talking about the city. I ended up I remember this so well. We had to do lots of community service as a student at Sidwell Friends, for which I'm eternally grateful. And I remember when I was a teenager, I had already had ideas and experiences around sort of mass inequality. Like it was pretty clear to me, but maybe I was too young and not paying attention, or who knows if it's an age thing. But when I was probably about, 14 or 15, and I went and I did a lot of babysitting. I mean, I did tons of babysitting, and I actually did all kinds of domestic work anywhere I could make money since about age 11. I was always working because I knew that would give me a bit more choice in life, even as a young person. I ended up doing a volunteer position in some daycare center, and it was about 3 blocks from the Capitol. And I would go there and I would work in this daycare center for these, little kids who are maybe between the ages of 2 and 5. And I had to work in this awful basement. And these young little kids, and I'd done tons of childcare. Like this was not a new experience for me, but it was a new experience in that I was working with young people and kids who were from different backgrounds than myself. But I mean, really, really impoverished young people. Many of them were African American, not all, but many of them. And I sat there on the floor with these kids, and all they did was sit on my lap and want to be held. Now, these are not babies. These were little kids they wanted to be held. They wanted to like pet me and kind of touch me, but they wanted to be held. And I thought, okay, that's great, but I'm here to play and, manage the kids and help them. Why are they just sitting on my lap? And I finally I was kind of nervous, but I asked whoever my boss was at the time, why are they doing that? And she said, oh, well, most of these kids just aren't held or touched at all because their parents are rarely ever around. So, and I just thought, wait a second, what's going on here? And I think because it was such a physical experience, I just thought, what is it? Why am I staring at the Capitol? Isn't this the place where dreams come true? The American dream. And there are these little kids in a basement in this derelict old building, 3 blocks away, and no one is caring for them. So I think that to me was was a realization. Now, I already knew, I had learned, I had understood. But it didn't really sink in until then. And so I guess for me, the unwillingness to accept the status quo is that, to me, the two biggest challenges we face as a global population is mass inequality and climate change. These are not entirely new today, right? It's just more people seem to be paying attention to them. I've been frustrated with both of those issues for a good part of my life. I participated in Earth Day when I was 11. I've marched in all kinds of marches on Washington. I've done a lot of work that espouses my values. But for me, it's continuing to see that play out in the way that we build countries, the way we build societies, and the way that we build businesses. So that's really what it takes me back to. I know it's a very simple story, but it's one that continues to pervade the way that I think. I have an absolute commitment and determination to see people equally and act accordingly. And I will treat everybody exactly the same, no matter where they're from and who they're from. I think many other people do that, but I don't think people do that enough. So I hope that helps answer your question.
No, it does. It does. And I really do get that. I mean, it's your formative years. It's these early experiences that you have, and and it's all about the situations that you're in and your upbringing and those things that you get to do or don't get to do as a kid or as a teenager. And I'm just thinking back to my own childhood and, both of my parents having a history in social services, and then my mom was a lawyer, but very much on the civil side of things. Yeah, I saw a lot of that and heard a lot of those stories, and they definitely stuck with me and impacted how I carry myself and how I act as an adult now, right? And as a professional. So I totally get that. Thinking about what you're doing now and getting WakeUp Capital going, and thinking about the types of investments that you're going to be making. And I can, what do you think is the foundation story of the fund really, and what you want to do with it? Where do you want to go with WakeUp Capital?
So, thank you for asking. It's one of the most exciting things I've done in a long time. So I'm thrilled about the birth of WakeUp Capital. I mean, I think that the name obviously says a lot. And I know I've spent a lot of time during our conversation talking about sort of, what people might refer to as sort of soft aspects of things versus the hard aspects. I haven't quoted one number as we've been speaking, and I've done that on purpose. I actually think that, making an impact and making good returns and profit are not mutually exclusive. But I think in the last, in the time that I've been working professionally, there seems to be this kind of 0 or 1, black or white feeling about doing good and doing well. They just can't happen together. And that the only way to measure success in business is on, our favorite, metric, which is profit, or whichever metric you might use. But, one that says, did we make money or do we not make money? And to me, having that one goal, that one metric, and everything driven toward it, and also modern portfolio theory, it doesn't necessarily create and build a world that I think we all want to wake up to.
Exactly.
I want to wake up to a world where profit's actually leaving the world in a better place, and that we don't have to dismiss it, but that actually building companies where the consequences of the company on people and on the planet are inherent into how we build the business. And one of the stories I like to tell, one of the sort of the evolution I like to point out to, and I can't take credit for this because I actually heard this explained in a really incredible conference, the Global Impact Investing Conference, the GIN. 100 years ago, we had to create the globally accepted accounting principles because we had a massive economic crash and we weren't really accounting for our money in a universally accepted way, right? But that took decades to develop. But that happened, right? And gave people more security in their investments and in the markets. And then in the 60s and 70s, all of a sudden we realized, oh my gosh, there are all these things happening that we can't predict. Can we come up with some metric to measure it? Well, risk, right? So we have to go out and measure risk. And that now, you have to think about risk. Who doesn't run a business without thinking about risk? There are people whose entire careers are built around risk measurement and management. I think now we're in a time of history where impact on the people and on planet, but having to think about that in any investment decision that is made is going to become inevitable. We're still early days, but that is part of why I wanted to start WakeUp Capital, because I was finding in doing angel investing and also just supporting early stage entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs, and just, so entrepreneurs without a social focus, is that these ideas of how do we incorporate the impact of what we're doing still seem to be seen as very soft and on the outside when it came to the investors who were at the table. I've experienced this all my career, actually, of, oh, it's so sweet, this nice, good thing you're doing.
Yeah.
Today. Isn't that so sweet? But we're here to make money. So thank you so much. We'll do that. We'll give money away. I guess to me, there's a business case for it.
There is. Social impact isn't charity. It's a business model.
Exactly. And same with environmental impact. I mean, I think people are seeing this, companies, investors, this has become an issue at the Business Roundtable. There are now, there's almost half a trillion under management with impact in mind, in funds in the world. ESG, now people actually know what that is, and it's being developed. So I think people are paying attention, and I think people are also realizing that if you want to keep your customers happy and your employees and your shareholders, this is going to become a factor. However, and this comes to WakeUp Capital, we can't just say that and then go do it, right? We need to actually understand and figure it out, and it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. You can't just go, it's like when people say, oh, we're now going to have a diversity and inclusion policy, and we're going to put a piece of paper on a shelf. But don't worry, we have it. We tick the box. That doesn't actually make it happen. That doesn't make you more diverse or inclusive. You have to do the work. You actually have to dig in and find out what that means. And then you have to take action, and you have to bring people along with you. So with WakeUp Capital, what I want to do is to help companies at early stage really understand the impact that they are going to have on society, on communities, and also on the environment. And how is that baked into their business model? And how can they scale that impact along, as part of their business growth? And then how can investors also measure and manage a company's success based on those key factors? So that when you say, okay, we invested in this company in 10 years time, how will you know it was a success apart from hopefully being able to say, we got a 10x return, right? We'd all love that. Can we also say that we, decreased the amount of carbon dioxide that was released into the atmosphere because of this product we invested in? Can we say that X number of people's, health improved as a result? Now, that's not a new thing to do, right? People have always shared that information. But what if we said that the actual company won't succeed unless we're working toward those exact specific targets, and we will be rewarded accordingly? So we want to help early stage companies really understand how to do that better. And then we also want to help grow the space of impact investing so that co-investors and any stakeholders we work with understand what that actually means. It's one thing to say it. We can all say we want to be, oh, of course, I want to be inclusive. I want to embrace diversity. I want to be more sustainable. But what does that actually mean? And to me, the only way to do it is deploy the capital, test it out, and work toward it.
Yeah, I get that. And I've talked about this a couple of times recently, but I heard John Collison from Stripe on a podcast recently talking about what you just mentioned, that generally accepted accounting principles just don't pick up on most of the important metrics that today's businesses are running themselves by, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And, carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, is that a metric that you can associate to your own company? No, you can't. It's all that we have right now to measure the impact that everyone's really having on the planet. What do you think in terms of different ways that you have to fund investors? Is this going to be just kind of straightforward, in the same way that other venture capital firms are funding early stage ventures? Are you going to follow the same path, or are you going to take some different avenues?
Great question. So, I mean, as a structure, yeah, we'd be like a venture capital firm, but I think real added value apart from just the capital is that we have the sort of experience and the know-how and the expertise on the impact side. So in addition to understanding how to assess and evaluate the business model and having great networks of people we can bring to the table to help those businesses think about their growth strategy and accessing growth capital, I think what we also really bring is commitment and understanding of how to incorporate impact and also ESG. I want to have that as a second piece too into the business as it grows at every level. And, startup entrepreneurs are working on so many things all at the same time. The idea of developing an ESG policy, when you're only 1 or 2 years in might seem a little bit onerous or overwhelming, or even just thinking through impact. I've talked to entrepreneurs who say, well, I just don't know how to start. This feels overwhelming right now. I'm just trying to keep the doors open, or, I'm just trying to raise money. I guess what we would do is we'd say, look, we know that we're not trying to make more work for you. What we're trying to have you do is work more intelligently, just from an impact standpoint. And how can we add value at each step so that we can say, look, by positioning yourself appropriately and identifying those impact metrics now, it actually might help you raise more money. Because you are helping, we know sustainable businesses often, can be more successful over time. Or the same thing with, diversity. I think businesses that develop sort of a gender balance early on have a much higher possibility and probability of succeeding over time. So that's what we do. And I think as sort of a specialist investor, and in specifically here in Ireland, bringing that to the table at an early stage is just helping to increase their chances for success. And then I guess another thing that we would do that I think is a bit different is we are rewarded based on our ability to achieve impact. So, if we want to achieve our carry as a fund, we not only have to reach financial thresholds, but we also have to reach impact thresholds. that we will be setting out for each investment individually and also for our own across our portfolio. And we
putting your money where your mouth is, really.
Yeah, exactly. Because otherwise, again, it's just talk. It's just a label or another, something but it's not actually substantive. Now, of course, I can talk about this for days, but at the end of it, we really will want to be able to demonstrate the impact that we've made and how it's done. Now, it's not an exact science. This is an artisanal process. I will not tell you today that I have a silver bullet on how to figure this out. And anyone who has said that, it's not true, because we're all all of us in this space are still trying to figure it out and make it work. But the only way to find out is to do a bit of trial and error. But what's most important is that the commitment is there from the outset. We are not rewarded until we achieve at least a measure of impact.
Yeah, I get that. And you're really making me think here, Faye. I was talking to a VC the other day who was thinking about investing in a founder that I've been working with. And his response was, listen, we're going to have to pass on this one, Pete, just because we have no experience in that field, in the market in which they're selling into, and we don't have enough connections. We're not going to really be able to help after the investment. Right. When you think about enlightened and innovative ways to fund entrepreneurs, that write them a check, but funding them with a transfer of experience and a transfer of knowledge and this know-how is critically important as well. And it's increasing the odds of startup success, which, in a nutshell is kind of the headline on it.
Yeah. I would just mention one other thing. I think another reason that motivates me to do this, to start WakeUp Capital, is when you look out across typical, like the venture capital space, internationally and even in Ireland, you could just go through and look at all the who we are pictures. Yeah. It's almost all men with some wonderful exceptions. Venture capital traditionally is just under 10%. I think it's maybe now up to 15%. I'd have to verify that, but I'm pretty sure who are women. And then when you get down to, diversity beyond that, it's not very rich, right? It's not very strong. But yet, if we just talk about women, we're 51% of the population. And not only that, but we have enormous buying power. So, and so many businesses in the world, the early stage businesses inevitably are, incorporate either women as a market or as your customers or your business partners. So what I know very well is if you want to make differences there, you need to be on the funding side of the table because
big time. Because
there are also not as many entrepreneurs who are females who are attracting funding, or from maybe minorities as well. So what I'm also interested in really is diversifying the space for venture capital so that it's not just something that's a little box that you tick. They're like, oh yeah, now we have a board member. She's a woman, so we're done. You have to go beyond that. You have to go beyond that.
It's all very white. It's all very male. I just finished reading Arlen Hamilton's book. It's About Damn Time. I'd highly recommend checking it out if you haven't seen it already. It's a great story.
Fabulous. I'm always looking for new inspiration. But I think when it comes to help, what you mentioned earlier about, not just bringing capital, but also experience, I think what I definitely stand over is my diversity of experience. Some people say, well, what about your track record? You haven't done venture before. Absolutely right. But I think that's actually going to work for me. The diversity of experience and perspectives, having lived in 4 countries, and also living in different environments, but also working with such a range of people. I think actually that's what we need. That's what you need. That's what you want at the table. Of course, you need to have people who've been working in, renewable energy for 25, 30, 50 years. That's really helpful. But in today's world, I think having a more diverse perspective can only, increase your chances for success. We used to say at Freedom Riders, when diverse worlds come together, beauty is inevitable. But I think here also, good business is inevitable too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Just looking at what's next, where do you see, how is this all going to unfold over the next few months for WakeUp Capital? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, at first, I guess I would say I'm delighted that we made our first investment that closed, I want to say a week ago or beginning 1st of August. So really happy about that. Irish business, it's called Magro, and it's an agri-tech company. And we're really, really, really happy to be involved.
Awesome.
With Gary and the team there. We are actively out raising funds for our first close. So, my dream is that we close the whole fund by the end of the year. But this is an interesting time to be raising money. My hope that would be my hope and my dream is that we close the fund by the end of the year. If we have a partial close, that's okay too. But I'm also really looking for dynamic, incredible LPs who share our commitment to our values and want to help sort of be part of WakeUp Capital's journey and vision. That's really important to me. I am not interested in aligning myself with either individuals, companies, or foundations or funds who don't buy into our vision. They can have their own take on it, but that's really important to me. So that's my hope. And then we have some really wonderful companies in our pipeline. And, the sooner we can get out there and start helping them more, the sooner the better. I think this is an amazing time to be investing in companies. It's also a really interesting time to see companies with grit and ability to innovate and be resilient in a time of serious adversity and challenge. I think this is when some of the most exciting things, as sad as it is for many people in the world from a health standpoint and an economic standpoint, this is also the time when amazing things can happen during great times of crisis. So I guess I don't want to let this crisis go to waste.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've just been so impressed with a couple of the founders I've been working with, Faye. Like I mentioned that, going through this period of the pandemic and seeing the social change that it brings about and seeing the needs on society that it creates.
Yeah.
Right. And that there are business models around those things.
Yes.
And go after it. Right. And it's been really impressive to see. And it's great to see you doing all this and well needed, especially in Ireland, where I think, the venture capital community needs a bit of a wake up. Right? No pun intended. So you've shared a lot with us today, Faye, and I feel like I know you pretty well. But why don't you tell us one thing that people wouldn't expect to know about you?
I find it very surprising that after a lot of the interesting work I have done and the experiences that I've had, that I am still determined to be 100% confident about everything I'm doing. So that
I hear you.
And here I have great conversations with all these amazing entrepreneurs, and I feel very comfortable about what I'm doing and but I'm constantly waiting and wanting people to say, this is the best thing ever. Let's do this.
Yeah.
Now, maybe that's not a surprising fact to share because I'm sure, you've been talking to me. I'm not short on self-confidence at all.
Yeah.
But I still really am surprised by that. I want to have this continuous validation. And I think that is probably what drives me to keep working at it. So that's what I would share. And in Ireland, I think that's really interesting because what I often notice about the Irish people, I can't help but make a sweeping generalization, is there's a bit of resignation that this is how it is.
I know.
And I guess I just find maybe it's refreshing as an American here that people really appreciate and I say our because you're one of them, our positive attitude and our want to make things better. But that doesn't always mean we know everything and we've figured it all out. And I guess what I just say about myself is I really believe in what I'm doing, but I'm still trying to figure it out. I still love being around people I have to be around people who are smarter than me because I'm waiting. I want people to keep saying, yeah, this is the right thing to do. Just keep going, Faye. Keep going.
Absolutely. No, I get that. And it's that constant striving and seeking to improve and get better.
Yes.
And there's that little gap left, different size for everybody. That little gap left, like you're saying, in that self-confidence, that is humility and that is curiosity and that is desire to learn. Like you're saying, surround yourself with people that can help you improve. And whether that be the people you're working with directly, your co-founders, or it's the people that you invest in, it's a great way to do it. It's a wonderful approach to life. And also a professional life with some, real commercial instincts as well.
Thanks.
Great. Well, Faye, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's been brilliant, fascinating story, and I really look forward to talking to you soon.
Thanks again, Pete. It's been a delight.
Thank you.
Money never sleeps, pal.
That does it for this week, folks, and thanks to Faye for opening up her mind to help us figure out why she does what she does. Links and show notes for this episode are on moneyneversleeps.ie, so check us out online. Also, you can subscribe to our Money Never Sleeps newsletter at moneyneversleeps.substack.com. If you're enjoying Money Never Sleeps and want to see it continue, make sure you hop on Apple Podcasts and give us a 5-star review. Remember, if you or a colleague need help attracting or retaining great talent for your fintech or financial services company, it is highly advisable that you build a relationship with a team at Top Tier Recruitment as they really know their stuff. You can find them at toptierrecruitment.com. And don't forget Conan Brophy from Create Sound. He mixes and edits each episode for us and is an excellent media man to get in touch with when you're thinking about launching your own podcast. As for me, I help startups get their products to market, get customers, and finance their vision. You can find me on LinkedIn, Twitter, or at norioventures.com. And you can follow Owen Fitzgerald on Twitter at OwenFitzgerald9. Finally, till next time, thanks for listening. See ya!
Money never sleeps, pal.